art for me has literally been a survival mechanism. And I think that once I've started talking about my sort of life story a little bit, you will see exactly why I would say that. But without art, I would be an incredibly lost soul. I think that what drew me to the art world was like it was just inherent. I've always said that art, you don't pick art, you don't choose to be an artist, it picks you. And I come from a family of makers, from my grandfather to my mother to my father, both sides of the family, were makers. And in the, at the very initial stage when I kind of showed my interest, my creative side, both my parents were incredibly hesitant in my kind of going into the art world. But my art teacher from school, Mrs. Robinson, I owe my life to Mrs. Robinson. She is the one that saved me. So I was in school in Bradford, you know, mind you, I was born in Pakistan and then moved to the UK. And in that process, I kind of developed a lot of learning difficulties. So I developed dyslexia and things like that. So I was having a very difficult time in school. Where the academics were just it was like literally not, I was
Yeah.
nothing was being registered. But in art lesson, I was suddenly shining. I was like the head student, and everybody loved me. And Mrs. Robinson was just like literally picking up my work and showing it to the class. And it's like I love that attention. And then when I told Mrs. Robinson that I really want to do this, and she's the one that taught me that actually this could be a career option. I came home, I told my parents, and Mrs. Robinson really wants me to go and study art and art college. And my parents are like, this isn't going to happen. We are a migrant family, right? We
Yeah.
need something that at the end of my education I can secure a job. Um, so I went back to Mrs. Robinson and I told her that this is what my parents are saying, that they would never allow me to do that. And then she took the step of inviting my parents into the school, showed them my work, and convinced them. I don't know what she saw at the age of, I was what, 10, 11? She saw something in me that she literally said to my parents, let Saad do this, and we will hear his name in the years to come. So my father was in the UK, and I was growing up with my mom and my two older sisters. So there was a lot of very strong women around me. My mother has always worked. She's always been a working mother. Very, very strong-minded, very strong person. Um, so I grew up with a lot of this kind of really strong feminine energy around me, and I believe that that's what really gave me the sensitivity that I believe is kind of the key element in being an artist, that you've got to be very sensitive to your surroundings. So I think that really strong feminine energy that I got from my mother and my two older sisters was what really really buried the seed in me that I need, I need to be more responsible. So I and then also I have to say that just growing up with my with these women around me, and being more aware of women's needs, what they need, the sensitivity, the care, and all of that. And I think that that's really important. I always say that if feminism had a face, it would be mine. Because I'm a real fighter for women's rights and needs, and what they should be rightfully having. So I think that so my childhood was very much about that. And watching my mother do all the tailoring. So she was tailoring for the local Pakistani community women. They would come to her for tailoring her kameez and all of that. So just watching that skill at a very close encounter really, like, it's like, wow, this is magic. You've got just this fabric, and suddenly you can cut and stitch and make a beautiful outfit out of. So that sense of making, I kind of gathered at a very early age, and I think that I couldn't have asked for a better setting to be the person that I am today. I'm a very much of an ideas-driven person, artist. And what I mean by that is that the idea always comes first, where it's making these paper tapestries and the patterns and how we want to make that, or the sculptures or anything else that I work with. So first I get the idea what I want to talk about in the work. And then I think about the materiality, the like what materials can I choose to best articulate that idea. So and then it's the marriage between these two that I think would work best. And there's a lot of play involved. I love playing with these materials that I've now selected, knowing very well that however I manipulate them, they will add up to the concept that I kind of initially wanted to kind of put out there. Each project brings its own set of challenges, and it's very exciting because then we kind of really working as a whole team in trying to resolve this issue. For example, a sculpture that we made last year. It's titled Convocation. It's a very, very narrow. It's the narrowest part of the sculpture is at the bottom, and then it kind of goes up. It stands at 7 meters high height. But how do you balance um, a sculpture that's this high with the narrowest part being at the bottom? So then we had to get involved with all the engineers, and like the construction engineers were coming in to advise on the work, and like how can make it work, and things like that. So each project brings its own set of challenges, and that's the exciting part about resolving that in a creative way that's really satisfying for me as an artist at the end. So aesthetics is really important, one thing. So even if the work is really working conceptually, so the material and the ideas and the way that they come together really kind of convey what I want them to say. But it's not working aesthetically. That's a failed piece of work for me. I am an artist. I don't want to be a social worker. I'm not a politician. I want to bring that joy of making and the beauty. I think the beauty is really, really, really important for me. I want that sort of sheer visual seduction to come in. I want the viewer to be seduced by the work first. So you come in through beauty, and then you start sort of peeling the work back, and then kind of discover all this kind of other conceptual underpinning that the work has to offer. Generally, I feel I'm a very optimist person. However, unfortunately, I also feel that the spoken words, have failed humanity a little. So I feel that art as a visual language is much more universal and much more accessible now. So I feel like that's the language that we all now need to kind of that's the kind of the go-to language that will bring that much needed peace and harmony in this world. So I think that if I was to say one word, what I want to my work to do is unity, bring more unity in this world. That's what I feel a lot of my work talks about, that unity. As I work, and that I feel like that there are a lot of symbols and patterns that kind of keep coming up, but I'm afraid I'm not gonna share these with you because my worry is that once the work is out there, the work needs to kind of then stand its own ground. I worry that if I kind of start kind of pointing different elements out, the viewers would be seeking those out then, and I don't want to kind of have that as a distraction in the viewing experience. But there are many sort of things that I feel like nobody's going to notice this, but but those elements are still very important for me to put in there. But maybe that's for you to kind of discover in the work, and I'll kind of hold that back to myself. I must tell you that I come from a family of tailors. So tailoring is a huge bit of history in my personal history. My grandfather was a tailor for the British Army. This is before the partition, India, Pakistan. Um, he was tailoring, making the uniforms for the British Army. And then after the partition, he was offered a job to come and work in the textile mills in Yorkshire in the UK. So he came in the mid 50s to the UK. So that's the association with the UK as far as we go back in the in with UK and Pakistan. But um, so I feel like that, so textiles is the reason why my family ended up in the UK in a way, So, and then my mother is an incredibly talented weaver, tailor, needle worker, all of that, and she has been working with that all her life. When she doesn't have any paid work, she just kind of makes a little tapestry or a cushion cover or something. So our house is just like full of my mother's work. It's everywhere. Whether it be a wall hanging or a cushion cover or a little table run or whatever. And I really wanted to work with that for a very long time in my, like address that part of my family history in my own practice. Unfortunately, or fortunately maybe, I've been very busy with shows after shows. And that opportunity never came that I could kind of really work with that um, until the COVID lockdown. I was locked out of my studio, and at the in my house where I still live with my mother, and surrounded by all these beautiful pieces that my mother had been working on for decades. Um, so as a starting point, what I did was that I collected all of my mother's work and I photographed it. And then the photographs were cut into very thin strips, and then my mother was teaching me how to weave. So that was my kind of lockdown project where we were kind of doing that whole kind of weaving project. So essentially what we were doing was using my mother's pattern as a material to make new patterns out of. So we were cutting existing pattern and then reweaving, but the patterns would never line up again. So we would then kind of inventing new patterns out of that. And I really wanted to use the word Tanabana, which is the title of the whole series and then many shows that I've done since. So, I mean, Tanabana is really a weaving term. It's literally translated as warped and weft. Warp and weft. It's the warp and weft. So that's Dana is the vertical, and Bana is the horizontal that kind of weaves through. So that's the literal translation of the word. But what I love is the Hindu theology around this word, where according to the Hindu theology, they also talk about Tanabana as the warp and weft of time and space, but also of Hindus and Muslims in India. And I love that. And just like, perfect. I couldn't have asked for a better title for this series because, where I'm talking about, reweaving stories, retelling of it, of stories and unity, it's all like, let's all weave together, let's all come together. And, I found a word that has all of this in it, and I'm bringing, it's a bit like retelling an old story, but using a new, like in a new fashion kind of way. So that's what I loved about this title, and I think that that's what's so significant about it. So a lot of the work uses many different designs from different rugs and textiles and whatnot. And then we strip them all together, mix all the strips up, and then reweave to tell it to make a new a design. So we are literally weaving time and space together, and maybe not just Hindus and Muslims, but different communities together, So I yeah, I think that that's what the work is doing. So firstly, the sacred text. I mentioned earlier that I love storytelling, and a lot of the work is about weaving different stories together. And these could be anything from a very human story to a big as big as a kind of a Quranic or a biblical religious story. Like it could be anything. So any form of storytelling is kind of really exciting for me. Uh, a couple of years ago, I came across this kind of rather ambiguous Quranic story that was talking about the end of the world. And according to the Islamic theology, there are many different signs that will happen before before the arrival of the final hour. And one of those signs is the disappearance of the text from the Quran. And the kind of the detailing of that is that um, so Quran as a book is a guide for humanity, and it's a gift from God to humanity, and closer to the final hour, it will be taken away from, and that's one of the first signs that the Quran will just disappear. Now, that's all that the Quran talks about, but nobody really knows what exactly does it mean. Do they mean that literally that the Quran, the words will just kind of disappear from the book? Or do they mean sort of more metaphorically that the holy text will kind of lose its significance and purpose in the society? And I kind of really like that ambiguity about this kind of the story that's mentioned, but nobody really knows exactly what it means. And but what it serves to my imagination is kind of crazy, right? Can you just imagine how scary that looks like? You've got this kind of rather kind of ornate, beautiful a book that's all kind of gilded and decorated, but it's empty, you know. And so I wanted to kind of try and recreate pages of the Quran where the words have disappeared. So the sacred text piece that's going into the collection is actually reimagining of one page from the Quran where the text is no longer there. But instead of making instead of fully removing the text, what I did was that I initially scanned one image of the Quran, one page of the Quran, and then digitally removed all the text from inside from it. And then I have and then I deconstructed the Arabic alphabet to the basics of just alphabet, and then those all of these images were then cut into very thin strips. So, and then essentially what I was doing was reweaving the text now deconstructed back into the page of the Quran. So the text is kind of appearing and disappearing at the same time. So it kind of really plays, again, like I said, because we don't know what it really means, the story. I really wanted to kind of really keep that ambiguity of appearing and disappearing at the same time. So that's the work. And I think that the way I then framed it in this kind of gilded gold frame, I think again worked really well because I really wanted it to give it that sort of precious kind of page from the holy book. So yeah, that's the sacred text piece that's going in the work, and the other piece that's we will talk about is the Tree of Life one, I believe it is it? Yeah, Tree of Life one. Um, I have this obsession with the concept of Tree of Life, because though in the Persian illustrations, it is represented as a physical real tree, but really the Tree of Life is a more of a metaphor, where it's the only tree that really talks about it kind of bridges the gap between earth and the heavens. So the tree is kind of seen as this kind of one stitch that kind of stitches the earth and the heavens together. And the tree of lives are life, sorry, the trees of life are the one the ones that have all the five life elements to it. And I always forget, sorry, I always forget the five elements. Five elements: food, shelter, medicine, spiritual, and economics. So any tree that offers these five elements, food for consumption, whether it's fruit or vegetable or whatever, shelter that we can sit in its shelter, or we kind of make a shelter of its wood, or if it has any kind of medical um, purposes, or if it's spiritual, um, for example, palm tree, or in the Islamic theology, or tulsi. I don't know the English word for it, the religious tree in Hinduism. But like many, so any kind of spiritual element, religious element to it, or if it's kind of have any kind of economy attached to the word. So these are the five elements, um, and that's fascinating, isn't it? Like if you think about that's all that we need, and that's what we are as humans. So really, tree of life, it's only a metaphor for a human. So and I'm just obsessed with, I've done many different versions of tree of life tapestries, and I feel like there's more to come, uh, because it's just one of my obsessions is that. Um, and the way that I've done that is that I've looked at these really old Persian carpets, and the way that the carpets are used as a framework to put something in the middle. So I took many different designs from Persian carpets as my framework, as the borders. Um, to put my version of the tree of life right in the middle. So it's then framed this really beautifully, in that, and then it's all woven together. And again, combining all of these five elements together. And I think that again, this element and these stories and then the concept work really well in this project as a weaving project. So that's the second work that I wanted to talk about, is the Tree of Life.